Hello. So today I'm going to be doing something a bit different. I'm going to be looking at a couple of events which have happened recently, namely the Astroworld concert disaster with Travis Scott and the shooting that happened with Alec Baldwin. I was thinking this morning that these two things have sort of something in common in that they both involve celebrities, famous people having a kind of a fall from grace, and that they both involve death in that, or like an accident that the celebrities in question were um, responsible for in some way, with Alec Baldwin being the producer of the movie and the one who pulled the trigger, and Travis Scott being the main attraction of what brought all these people to this concert where there's a big kind of stampede of people trampling each other to death, unfortunately. And I mean, it's pretty dark and grisly stuff, both of these events that happened. And I don't mean to like make light of it or anything by doing an astrology report on it. I know some astrologers prefer to just kind of avoid these kind of current events things in general. I actually have a group on Facebook called Current Event Astrology, and I don't know. Sometimes I kind of wonder about it. Like there's things I was noticing this month, and I kind of held off on posting about it, and I haven't been quite as active in that group and stuff. But yeah, I mean that whether that's another question for later. I have decided, anyways. Right now, I'm going to take a look at. I already did take a look at this morning, and I noticed some interesting correspondences that I'll share with you guys now. Okay, so what we're looking at here, I'm starting with Travis Scott because it's the more recent incident, and I'm kind of working backwards here. Um, we have Travis Scott's chart in the inner wheel, and we have the date of the what I call the Astroworld disaster. His kind of concert or album tour is called Astroworld. By the way, that the date of the incident is on the outer wheel, and I'm going to go through this and show you guys some things that stand out. Now, what stands out to me as being particularly interesting is, first of all, here, if you look in the area of Sagittarius, well, first of all, let me just point out that I don't have the exact birth time for Travis Scott. I I looked up his birth chart and got a chart where they listed off his moon at 0 degrees Sagittarius. However, depending on what the actual hour of his birth was, he could have been born with his moon, in the later degrees of Scorpio. Maybe a bit further ahead in Sagittarius, but there's a certain wiggle room or leeway with his actual moon sign. And of course, don't pay attention to the ascendant because, yeah, we don't have the time for the rising sign. But that said, during the time of this disaster, the moon, the transiting moon, basically transited his natal moon placement one way or another. If it was at the end of the Scorpio or at the beginning of Sagittarius, he had the moon transiting his natal moon. Okay? On top of that, what makes it particularly interesting is that the south node of the moon is right there at 1 degrees Sagittarius. And so and if you put this into context too, we are heading into a lunar eclipse in Taurus, conjunct Fixed Star Algol this full moon, and that's going to be followed by the last solar eclipse in Sagittarius. So this event happened as a kind of a prelude or a precursor to the eclipses, the lunar eclipse conjunct Algol and the solar eclipse in Sagittarius. I think you can make the argument that what I was saying is that I think in some way we can understand the way eclipses work. It's kind of funny because I almost want to talk about it in terms of causality, as if there's a kind of a retro causality with eclipses. But I don't. The point of astrology, as I see it, is that the eclipses or anything that happens in astrology doesn't cause anything. Rather, it's a sign of something. It's like an omen, right? So it wouldn't really be like an omen causes something to happen, but it's a sign of what's going to happen, but in a way that works both forwards and backwards. That if you look at, there's going to be a lunar eclipse conjunct Algol, that's a sign, and that's not just a sign of what's going to happen at that specific point in time. It's not like there's something that's just going to happen right as the moon is in Taurus and there's a lunar eclipse, and then as the moon goes dark and all this shit happens, but rather that things are going to happen both before and after, and that we're kind of in the vicinity of eclipse season. So these events that we're seeing are like leading up to the lunar eclipse. It's not the lunar eclipse is causing them, but we're getting into that territory where things are being set off so that when the eclipse happens, it's like the eclipse is saying, this is what I was telling you about, all this stuff leading up to this moment kind of thing. I think that's the best I can describe it anyways. Now, while I've got this chart up, there's a couple other things worth mentioning here. I'm going to use a different color here. If you look at the Saturn in Aquarius, that's another thing that stands out to me. The transiting Saturn right now is at 07 degrees Aquarius, and Travis Scott has his Saturn at 06 degrees Aquarius. So what is this? It's a Saturn return we're looking at. It's a Saturn return moment for Travis Scott. Not a particularly easy Saturn return moment by any means, but this is the maturity of Saturn coming through in a very strong way for this. Hey, I shouldn't be laughing about it. I mean, it's more of a nervous laugh, but as you can see, it's kind of striking that just 1 degree off, you've got turning 30. He born in 1991. His entrance into adulthood, adult responsibility, the responsibility of being a superstar and having control of massive crowds, and you might even go to say that there's something. If you look at the combination of the moons being conjunct, transiting moons being conjunct, and transiting Saturn being conjunct, there's something here which is kind of uncanny, as if this was perhaps a fated incident, that there's nothing accidental about this accident in some way, like this was meant to happen. But, maybe not the most, obviously not the very positive happening. Another thing worth pointing out here is that Travis Scott himself has a sun in Taurus. Okay? And if you look at, it's not like a perfect conjunction or anything, but if you look at sun in Taurus, where is Uranus? It's at 12 degrees Taurus, and his sun is at 9 degrees Taurus. That's 3 degrees off. That's, in the ballpark. It's not a super tight conjunction, but his sun and his Saturn is getting directly hit by this square that we've been going on through all year, which is the Saturn-Uranus square, like his chart is really getting hit by it. And when if you look at what was going on at the time of this, incident, look at this. The sun. We just had a new moon in Scorpio. The moon may have been. I'm just using 8 p.m. as the time for the incident. I don't know specifically what hour it happened, but apparently it happened like one song into his set, and they said it was. I mean, I'm just using 8 p.m. because I'm assuming that's kind of like when concerts kind of start. It could, but I'm not. Again, I'm not perfect with the. If somebody knows the actual exact perfect times, you can let me know. But I'm not getting that tight with my research here. The approximate time is good enough for me, anyways, right now. At that time, not only was the moon hitting his natal moon placement and the south node. By the way, in some of these books that I've been reading, I believe it was like the Picatrix I was reading. They say like don't do anything when the moon is on the nodes, and this is a point in case example of why it's can be very dodgy when the moon is transiting the node, whether that's the north node or the south node. Like, yeah. And it's, it's also kind of just as a random thing that I should mention while it's on my mind is that Travis Scott was born in Houston, and this disaster was in Houston, like his hometown, the town that he was born in. And I mean, I don't have the exact dates for Travis Scott's birth or anything, but that's also, it kind of adds to the significance in some way. Anyway, there's something symbolic about it, about this having this problem in the place where you were born, while the moon was in the same place while you were born, while Saturn's in the same place while you're born. Like, it all just starts stacking up in this way. Anyways, but what was also going on is that the sun in Scorpio was at 13 degrees at this time. So it was just 1 degree off. Here, I'll draw it in there. I don't know if that's kind of messy. Maybe I'll go back. Maybe I'll use, I don't know, yellow or something. There, well, yeah, I don't know. Is that clean enough? Can you see what I'm pointing at? You've got that near perfect opposition between the sun and Uranus when it happened. That's hitting his natal sun, setting off this whole T-square thing with Saturn. And I mean, he's also got Jupiter at 5 degrees of Leo, so there's basically like a grand cross going on throughout both Travis. When you combine the Travis Scott's natal chart with the transits, there's lots of action happening on the fixed signs. It's a lot going on here, but I thought I'd just share. I was just taking a look at it this morning, and I thought it was worth sharing. Anyways. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with what happened with the Alec Baldwin shooting incident. Now, I don't have Alec Baldwin's birth time, so the exact position of his moon and ascendant, there's some leeway or some wiggle room. And when it comes to the actual shooting itself, I looked into it, and they said it happened on the afternoon of Thursday, October 21st. So I just put in 3 p.m. as an approximate time, but I could be wrong. Don't take that 3 p.m. as being like an exact, precise thing. I'm just kind of approximating it. So where do we start with this? First of all, I think it's worth mentioning that there's something interesting happened with Alec Baldwin. In that Alec Baldwin has Sun in Aries and Moon in Libra, and right before the shooting happened, we had a full moon in Aries So for those of you who know astrology, I probably don't have to explain this, but when the sun is in Libra, the moon reaches its full point at the opposite end of the zodiac, which would be Aries. So it's kind of interesting in that sense because, what full moon, Baldwin himself was born under the opposite full moon to what happened with the shooting. Now, the thing is that it's not like, I mean, that's just where the moon reached its peak lunation. But if you actually look at where the moon, I mean, was the day of the shooting, it wasn't on the full moon in Aries. It was right after it, after the moon had left Aries, had started its waning phase, and had entered Taurus. And here, I'll use my little marker here. The moon was conjunct Uranus in Taurus approximately around the time it happened. Again, I'm just approximating it with a 3 p.m. time, but if you use that information given that it happened on the afternoon of Thursday, the moon was, within a bit of wiggle room. It's pretty damn close to Uranus. Now, what does Uranus represent? It represents things that are shocking, surprising. It can be things that are both good and bad, but I think there's something about what happened which is certainly shocking and surprising and has the less savory or less the I don't know what to say, less savory. It's like not the kind of quality of Uranus that we'd be happy and celebrate. It's more of the problem side of Uranus, or the bad news surprise rather than the good news surprise in this case. And so it's kind of, well, I don't know. That's one thing, anyways, worth noting, is that this incident happened right when the moon was applying to Uranus, or around that time. Some other things worth noting. Alec Baldwin has his moon in Libra at 8 degrees. And while it wasn't totally conjunct by any means, Mercury is right there. Here, I'll select that so you can see it. Mercury's right there at 11 degrees of Libra. And it was only like a few days before this, I believe, here, I've got my notes here. Mercury stationed direct on October 17th. So that's like 4 days before the shooting. And so I think, this is maybe an extreme example of what we call Mercury retrograde shadow, which is like, just because Mercury stations direct, it does, you're not necessarily out of the clear of Mercury retrograde-y things. And it's like, this is kind of, an accidental shooting is a pretty brutal example of a Mercury retrograde problem. But there you go. Anyways, Mercury, which had recently gone direct, was in the vicinity of Baldwin's natal moon placement. There's also what was happening at the time of this transit. If you look, we've got Mars here at 24 degrees of Libra and Pluto at 24 degrees of Libra. So that's Mars square Pluto. Here, I can kind of draw that in. So that there was a perfect square that day between Mars and Pluto. And Pluto often represents something that is secret or hidden, that something that seems like it's like, but it has a lot of power to it, right? Something that's small, hidden but powerful, secret but powerful. It could even be, in this case, something that is overlooked but powerful, such as like whether you overlook a live round of ammunition in a gun that, it seems small and insignificant, but it obviously can have a huge impact and end somebody's life and wreck somebody's career even, or who knows, right? Like that. So in some way, the Mars square Pluto is fitting. Keep in mind also that Mars is not conjunct with Mercury at the time that this happened, but the fact that it's sharing the same sign with Mercury in Libra means that it's sort of like blending with that Mercury retrograde effect to some extent. Another thing worth mentioning is that we're talking about Mercury retrograde shadow. When Mercury, the point where Mercury stationed retrograde, I don't have it in my notes exactly, but it's like around this point. Like it's either the 24th degree or the 25th degree. Mercury basically stationed retrograde on this square with Pluto, and now Mars is there hitting off that point where Mercury stationed retrograde shortly after Mercury goes direct. Hopefully you can follow what I'm saying, because I'm not gonna, I don't know, I'm not gonna walk you through that one in this video, but you know, Mercury's out of the retrograde shadow phase now, but that kind of point at 24 degrees Libra is the end of the Mercury retrograde shadow, and Mars is there. So I think that's kind of interesting. And you can't really see it because I've drawn this line over it, so I'll kind of go back a bit. But the other thing which is interesting is that Baldwin has his Jupiter at 28 degrees Libra, and there you go. There's like his Jupiter was conjunct where the sun was at the time of the shooting. This is kind of an interesting one because Jupiter is usually considered to be a more of a positive planet. So I haven't really got a good delineation of what it means that the sun was conjunct his Jupiter, because you know you might consider that to be more of a positive thing. But there's some interesting things if you notice that Jupiter's retrograde and it's really close to the north node, not the south node, the north node. And then he's got the north node at 0-1 degrees Scorpio there with Neptune. And, you know, Neptune represents a kind of intoxication or drunkenness, or maybe not seeing things clearly sometimes, and that the north node can have this effect of blowing it out of proportion. And there's a retrograde Jupiter nearby it, and so that might lead to some sort of excess or not overlooking the fine details maybe. I don't know. I'm just kind of winging it on this one. Now, as you know, we're going to be having the eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. However, the nodes move backwards compared to all the other planets. So like the nodes are coming in near the end of Taurus and Scorpio. That's why we're going to be having the lunar eclipse conjunct Algol, because Algol's at like 26 degrees of Taurus. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying here. Yeah, but it's kind of interesting anyways that the nodes are kind of opposite anyways to what this eclipse cycle is going to be, although Baldwin's node is kind of at the other end of the sign. Well, I figure since I started with a video of me on camera, I'll end with a video on camera, in that there's something with both of these incidents anyways, that even though they may have not featured an exact aspect with Algol at the time of them happening, we're leading into this lunar eclipse conjunct Algol, and I think that both of these incidents kind of bear that kind of mark of Algol, in the sense that one of the indications of Algol has something to do with mob violence, and although it's not like the mob violence in the it wasn't like, you know, a mob ganging up on one particular person, but it was like this. The Travis Scott incident was basically like a mob that was out of control. You know, they associate the name Algol as having the same kind of root as alcohol. So, you know, the drunken mob, out of control mob violence and violent death that comes from that. It's all very fitting with this lunar eclipse conjunct Algol. And when did it happen? On the new moon of this cycle that was perfectly opposite Uranus, as the moon hit Travis Scott's natal moon placement, as the moon hit the south node, the opposite side of, you see, I mean, it all kind of adds up really strikingly. So I thought there was like, I mean, I have my kind of reservations though. I mean, like, whether, I know a lot of astrologers choose not to cover material like this, but at least, I don't know. I don't want to sensationalize it or try to like use others' misfortune, you know, to make a name for myself or anything like that. I'm just like, as an astrologer, paying attention to what's going on in the world. This is what I'm looking at. These are the things that have been coming up, and I'm basically doing my job to share with you guys what I'm noticing, and hopefully it illuminates something, serves the purpose of illuminating something about how astrology works and how we can see it in action in the current times that we're in. And so, yeah, I'm just wrapping up here. I think that's basically all I've got for now. Hopefully you guys appreciate this video and get something out of it. All right, thanks.